നാരായണാഖിലഗുരോ ഭഗവൻ നമസ്തേ ഗുരുവായൂരപ്പ. Good morning to all and pranamam to everyone who has joined. So with the blessings of Guruvayoorappan, we are holding our sixth session on Narayaneeyam. In today's session, we are starting Dashakam 4. And before we start, we will start the session with an invocation by Anju.
Krishna Guruvayurappa Sharanam Gajananam Bhutaganadisevitam Kapitthajambhuphalasarabhakshitam Umasutam Shokavinashakaranam Namami Vikhneshwarapadapangkajam Shuklambaradharam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasanna Dhyayet Sarvavikhnopashantaye. Krishna Guruvayurappa Sharanam.
Anju, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Guruvayoorappa. So we are starting the fourth Dashakam of Narayaneeyam. If you remember last time we discussed Dashakam 3, and if you remember in Dashakam 3, Bhattathiri is talking about the qualities of a perfect bhakta, and he's described how a bhakta should behave to attain Guruvayoorappan. And in Dashakam 4, so as Bhattathiri is continuing his offerings to Guruvayoorappan, and this is a state of Bhattathiri where he is in intense pain. He is still having, even though he is with bhakti, he is under devotion to Guruvayoorappan, he is still having that intense pain of the physical ailment that he is suffering from, and also the mental pain that is caused due coming from that physical, affliction that he is having. So in Dashakam 4, Bhattathiri is talking about the system called Ashtanga Yoga that he is saying that he should practice. He will be able to practice to attain Guruvayoorappan. So here Bhattathiri is talking about the ways that he can achieve Guruvayoorappan, or the ways through which he can reach Guruvayoorappan. That is what he is trying to describe in Dashakam 4. So in Dashakam 3, it was the qualities of a perfect bhakta, how a perfect bhakta should behave. And here now he is showing the steps through which that perfect bhakta can reach Guruvayoorappan. So he is showing the methods. Now, Bhattathiri in the previous sloka, as I said, he is suffering from the afflictions and he is seeking Guruvayoorappan's blessings. Now he is talking about a system called, as I said, the Ashtanga Yoga. This system is coming from Guruvayoorappan himself. Guruvayoorappan, through his Shishya Adishesha, who took an incarnation of Patanjali Maharshi, gave us this system called Ashtanga Yoga. And in the first half of Dashakam 4, Bhattathiri is describing this Ashtanga Yoga. So it's actually a very technical Dashakam, which is slightly hard for me to explain as well. But I will try my best with Guruvayoorappan's blessings. And we'll try to see what Bhattathiri is trying to talk about here. So starting off with Sloka 1.
Kalyata mama kurushvatavatim Kalyate bhavatu basanam yaya Spashtamashtavidhayogacharya Pushtaya shutava tushtimapnuyam വരം നൽകുന്ന ശ്രീ ഗുരുവായൂരപ്പ, എത്രമാത്രം ആരോഗ്യം കൊണ്ട് അവിടുത്തെ ഉപാസനം ചെയ്യപ്പെടുന്നുവോ എനിക്ക് അത്രയും ആരോഗ്യം ഉണ്ടാക്കി തരണമേ. പൂർണ്ണമായ അഷ്ടാംഗ യോഗാനുഷ്ഠാനം കൊണ്ട് വിളംബമെന്നേ അവിടുത്തെ പ്രസാദം ഞാൻ നിശ്ചയമായും പ്രാപിക്കുമാറാകട്ടെ.
Okay, so starting off in Sloka 1, Bhattathiri says, Mama, for me. He is requesting Guruvayoorappan, Tavadim Kalyadam, Kurushva, kindly bestow me at least that much health. Only give me that much, because Bhattadiri is suffering from this physical ailment and he's requesting Guruvayoorappan to give me only that much health. So that is required to. He's continuing. By which, by which, Bhavat Ubasanam, I am able to worship you. Guruvayoorappa, give me at least that much health by which I can worship you, Kalyade, by which I can perform your worship. And what Bhattadiri is asking in, so it's like a conversation. So Guruvayoorappan probably, they are having a conversation. Bhattadiri and Guruvayoorappan are having a conversation. So but Guruvayoorappan will say, you already have so much devotion and you are, doing bhakti to me. What will you do if I give you a little bit more health? So Bhattadiri is answering. He's answering to Guruvayoorappan. Pushtaya, he will do a complete practice of Ashtavida Yoga Charyaya. He will do a complete practice of the 8-limbed yoga. Ashtavida Yoga Charyaya. That is the yoga which is of 8 limbs. It has 8 steps or 8 limbs to it. So the 8-limbed yoga, which is known as the Ashtanga Yoga, he will practice it completely. He's saying that if you give me a little bit more health, Guruvayoorappa, I will, because he's right now very weak, due to the physical ailment and due to the paralysis, he's not able to, even sit straight or even do anything with his body. So he's saying, if you give me a little bit more health, then I will try my best to do a complete practice of the 8-limbed yoga, which is called the Ashtanga Yoga, through which I will worship you. Through that Ashtanga Yoga, I will try to attain you, Guruvayoorappa. That's what Bhattadiri is saying. And he's saying, Ashu, very soon, by doing that, very soon, he says, Tava Tushtim, your grace, Guruvayoorappa, by doing that Ashtanga Yoga, by completely doing that Ashtanga Yoga, with that health that you will be providing me, I will definitely attain you. Tava Tushtim, your grace, Spashtam, definitely apnuyam, I will attain it. So he's very sure that if he has a little bit more health, he is able to do this Ashtanga Yoga, and through that he will definitely get Guruvayoorappan's grace. So Bhattadiri is talking about this 8 limbs, or we can say 8 steps that Bhakta can practice to reach Guruvayoorappan, to reach the Brahman. And what are these 8 steps? These are the limbs of the yoga system, Ashtanga Yoga, that was prescribed by Adishesha, took an incarnation of, and that Ashtanga Yoga is coming from that Guruvayoorappan only. Okay, so he's talking about starting off with Yama, Niyama. These are the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga: Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. These are the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, and this 8 limbs, you can assume it as 8 steps. So you have to cross each of these steps. It's not like you can directly go to a 3rd step or the 5th step. It is prescribed that you have to start with the first step, then go to the 2nd step, 3rd step, like that, to reach the final step. So whoever is practicing, they have to go through each of them. That is Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. These are prescribed by Maharshi Patanjali, who is an incarnation of Adishesha, who is Guruvayoorappan himself. And so we will see each of these steps, each of these yogas, as we go into the next slokas. So Bhattadiri, and this 8 steps, which is known as Ashtanga Yoga, great sages have discussed this in detail. Swami Vivekananda has spoken a lot about Ashtanga Yoga, and he called it Raja Yoga, the path of Raja Yoga. And if you go into in-depth literature related to Swami Vivekananda's teachings, you will see a lot of discussions on each of these steps, which is within the classification of Raja Yoga. So, but Bhattadiri is saying is that by a complete practice of Ashtanga Yoga, by doing that Ashtanga Yoga completely, I will attain Guruvayoorappan. I will make Bhagavan happy. Okay, that is what Bhattadiri is wishing here, and it doesn't mean that he's not doing these yogas. He is definitely, he has done these yogas. He has done it in his life before also, but he is not able to do it in perfection right now. He is not able to do it in completeness. And to do it in perfection and completeness, Bhattadiri needs both time and health. He needs Bhagavan's grace because he needs more time, and also he needs the grace of Bhagavan to get more healthy so that he can perform these yogas. That's what Bhattadiri is requesting Guruvayoorappan. And Bhattadiri says in this sloga, basically what we as a bhakta has to understand is to realize the Brahman. This is a practical sadhana. Ashtanga yoga is a practical sadhana that a bhakta can practice to reach towards Guruvayoorappan. Now, we in the previous dashakams, if you remember, Bhattadiri addressed karma, bhakti, and jnana, different paths that we can follow, right? So we have karma, the path of karma, the path of bhakti, the path of jnana. But it is not just doing karma or doing bhakti or doing jnana, as we discussed previously. They have to be performed as a yoga. It has to be karma yoga, it has to be bhakti yoga, and it has to be jnana yoga, right? So if you want to make it karma yoga, it has to be done as a yoga charya. In anything, if it has to become a yoga, it has to be done as a yoga charya. Just like you can only attain love by becoming love or by expressing love, right? By through love only you can attain love. Just like that, through yoga only you can attain yoga. So you become a yogi by yoga charya. So you have to perform yoga to do activities as a yoga. So that's what the meaning here is. So anything that we do, karma, bhakti, and jnana, they have to be performed as a yoga. And to do that, this is the system. The Ashtanga yoga is a system that helps us, in systematically, carrying out activities as a yoga, and then attain Guruvayoorappan. So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, we have seen this in our last Dashakam also, describes yoga as yogascha chitta vritti nirodha. So yoga is a word that is highly used in our current world, but not in the right sense many a times. What does yoga mean? As per the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, yoga means chitta vritti nirodham. That means, if you remember, we discussed this in our mind. So it is a way for us to control our mind. So if you see, our mind will have thoughts arising, and we said that these thoughts are like waves coming in the ocean, and these thoughts, they are, you will see one wave coming, and after that there is another wave coming. So they are creating these waves, which are the modifications that are happening in our mind. They are called vrittis, and the actual thought that it creates is called a pratyay. We saw that before. So let's say a thought arises in our mind, and then again another thought comes. That modification that is happening in our mind is called vrittis. And what is yoga? Yoga is basically chitta vritti nirodham. That means to silence these modifications of the mind. Our mind has to become this waves have to kind of end, and then it has to settle down, and we have to reach that silence that we experience in the deep ocean. That state, achieving that state, is yoga. So yoga is the silencing of the modifications of the mind. If our mind is under our control, then we attain that state where we are not attached to any of our thoughts, and we are in that silence that is in between the thoughts, and that silence is like the silence in a deep ocean. That is our true nature. So yoga is essentially that is how Patanjali has described yoga in Yoga Sutras. And what are these Ashtanga yoga? So to reach that state of yoga, chitta vritti nirodham, we have these 8 limbs, these 8 steps. So we'll see each of these. Bhattadiri talks about each of these steps in the next slogas. So we'll see each of these as we go into the next slogas. Starting off with yama. Yama is called the control of the senses. Yama and niyama are basically like a rules. Yama is like the general rules, and niyama are like the specific rules. Yama relates to control of our senses. We have our 5 senses and our mind. So the control of our senses is called yama. Niyama is using our senses when needed. So we will use our senses under our own control and our will. That is called niyama. Niyama is using the senses when needed under full control with our own will. It's not like our senses will go about anywhere. We can control where our senses should be. That state is called niyama. Once somebody practices yama and niyama, so as I said, these are like hierarchical steps. So you first start with yama, then you practice niyama. Once you practice yama and niyama for several years, and once you reach that state, that is when you qualify for asana. Asanas are which are the postures that we see, but the asana that is being described here is not technically that. So we have asanas for exercise, we have asanas for achieving physical health, that those asanas are described in hatha yoga and all, but that's not the asana being described here. It is asana means sthira sugam asanam. Wherever you are able to do sthira sugam, that means we are able to sit comfortably or position ourselves comfortably and in a stable way, that is called asana. So asana is sitting in a sitting position. If you are able to sit in a stable and comfortable way for a long period of time, that is called Sthira Sugam. If you are able to attain that Sthira Sugam, that is called asana. So third one is asana. And why are these described? These are described as a way to attain Guruvayurappan. So all these steps of yoga are not meant for any physical fitness or any physical strength or in attaining physical strength. Definitely physical strength is required. But what the ultimate goal of each of these are to attain that Guruvayurappan, to contain our mind, to control our mind, and have that mind fully focused on Guruvayurappan. That's why these steps are mentioned. So we have asana, which is stable and comfortable sitting position or position. Then we have pranayama, which is the gradual ordered intake of our prana, which is our breath. So we will take gradually and in an ordered way, we intake our breath, sustain it inside and release it outside. This is our the prana is our the vital energy in us, and that is there in the breath that we take in, and controlling it gradually and in an ordered fashion, controlling our breath is called, with awareness, is not known as pranayama. Then there is pratyahara, which is the withdrawal of the senses from the objects. So our senses gets attached to the objects, and that create mental impressions in our mind. Withdrawing our senses from objects, which are called vishayams. So withdrawal of our senses from the external objects, that is called pratyahara. The sixth step is dharana. So we already, if you remember, we already saw dharana, dhyana, and samadhi in our previous dashakam. Okay, we discussed it a little early when we spoke about meditation in our dashakam 3. So, but we will see that technically in this sloga, in the real sense. So dharana is, that is the effort to fix the mind on Bhagavan, on a center, on an object. That is called dharana. So that dharana is that process of making our mind focus on one thing, or the process of concentrating our mind is called dharana, which we have seen already in Dashakam 3. Then we have the next state, which is called dhyana, which is actually the meditative state. So once you practice dharana, then after a while we reach a state of meditation, which is called dhyana. And then the final state is samadhi, which is the state of pure awareness. That is the state that we have seen before, where we are one with that Guruvayurappan, where the Guruvayurappan, the Bhakta, and the Bhakti, everything becomes one, and you will see the Guruvayurappan illuminating from that person, that state of in pure awareness, which is the stillness inside the ocean. That state, in that state there is no thoughts, and that state, that means there is no mind. That state is called the samadhi state. So these are the 8 steps of Ashtanga Yoga. So going on to Sloga 2, where Bhattathiri talks about the first 3 steps of Ashtanga Yoga.
ब्रह्मचर्य दृढदादिभिर्यमैः आप्लगादिनियमैश्च पाविताः कुर्महे दृढममी सुखासनं पङ्कजाद्यमपि वा भवत्पराः. ഈ അടിയങ്ങൾ അങ്ങയെ തന്നെ ആശ്രയിച്ചവരായി ഉറച്ച ബ്രഹ്മചര്യം, അഹിംസ, സത്യം തുടങ്ങിയ യമങ്ങളാലും സ്നാനം, മനഃശുദ്ധി, ജപം മുതലായ നിയമങ്ങളാലും പരിശുദ്ധരായി തീർന്നിട്ട് സുഖാസനമോ പത്മാസനം, സ്വസ്തികാസനം മുതലായ ആസനവിശേഷമോ ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒന്ന് അഭ്യാസം കൊണ്ട് ഉറപ്പിച്ചുകൊള്ളാം.
So in Sloga 2, Bhattathiri continues, and if you see here, Bhattathiri is talking about the first 3 steps, which are yama, niyama, and asana. He's talking about the first 3 steps, or the first 3 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga in Sloga 2. So he says, Bhavat Paraha Ami, and he says, here he uses the term Vayam. So Bhavat Paraha Ami Vayam, those who are devoted to thee. And he says Vayam or Ami Vayam, which means we all. So here Bhattathiri is not just referring to himself. He could have just said I, who is devoted to you. Instead of saying I, he's used we all. So he's referring to each and every one of us, because Bhattathiri is seeking good health from Guruvayurappan. And if you really see, we all are in a state where we may have physical ailments or mental ailments, and we all need this health. That is the prayer that we should have to Guruvayurappan, to give us this health so that we can know you more. So Bhattathiri therefore is using we all. So therefore this is something we all have to practice. And anyone who reads Narayaneeyam, the goal is for attaining Guruvayurappan, but also we also have the goal of having this health, the good health, so that we can try to attain Guruvayurappan in the best sense. So the prayer is, we all who are devoted to thee. That's why Bhattathiri is talking about everyone who is reading Narayaniyam. Brahmacharya Dridada Adibihi Yamaihi. He says, by the practice of the discipline known as Yama, which is the first step, which consists of firmness in Brahmacharya. So Yama has several sub disciplines within it, but he specifically addresses Yama, and one of the sub steps of Yama, which is Brahmacharya. He clearly said Brahmacharya as a very important thing for somebody who is practicing Yama, and we'll see what Yama technically involves. So he says, first, we all who are devoted to you, we will practice this discipline known as Yama, which consists of practicing Brahmacharya. Then he says, Aplava Adi Niyamaihi Cha, and the discipline, once you practice Yama, then we will practice the discipline known as Niyama, which is the second step, which consists of having purity, which includes daily bath, having a pure body, and also a pure mind, and also doing deeds which are pure. So consisting of daily bath and other purity of your mind and the deeds, and also rules of right conduct. So you will conduct yourself in a way which is in total purity, attached to Guruvayurappan. That is your niyama. So he said, he will practice Yama, or we all will practice Yama, we all will practice Niyama. And by doing that, Pavitaha, we get purified. We get purified in both our body. So there is purity in our external body, there is purity in our internal body, because in Yama and Niyama, you are also practicing, taking names of Guruvayurappan. So there is purity in your mind and purity in your words, and also purity in your actions. So being purified in body, speech, and mind. And with that, once you attain that purity, so it's very important to understand this. Somebody who is going towards asana, practicing these yogasanas, they have to first practice this Yama and Niyama very well. They have to be perfect in Yama and Niyama. Then only there is a point of doing these asanas. You have to have a perfect mind, which is already purified by practicing Yama and Niyama. And then you go into asana, where Bhattathiri is saying, Pangaja Adyam, he will start with asanas like the lotus pose, which is the Padmasana. He will use asanas like Padmasanas, and the other asanas, Sugasanam, Abhiva, or the other asanas, which are all Sugasanams, which are Stira Sugam Asanam. So he will use the other asanas that are comfortable, such as the Sugasana. There is Padmasana, there is Sugasana, and there are several other asanas that are appropriate for Dhyanam. So he will use these asanams, which are Stiram and Sugam. He will use them. Dridam kurmahe. I shall practice this firmly, or we shall practice this firmly. That means all of us who are practicing Narayaneeyam, who are praying to Guruvayurappan, Bhattathiri's prayer is that we all should practice Yama, Niyama, and also the asana. And once we have perfected Yama and Niyama, we can practice the asanas, which is having a Stira Sugha position, and through that we can try to practice attaining towards Guruvayurappan. So Bhattathiri's prayer is that we shall practice this firmly. He will practice this firmly if you bless me with a little bit more health, because Bhattathiri's state is right now such that he is not able to do these properly because of the physical ailment that he is having. So that is his prayer to Guruvayurappan. So we will see, as Bhattathiri addressed the first three steps of Ashtanga Yoga. We will see each of them in this loga, starting off with Yama. Yama is the restraining of the senses and the deep introspection of the mind on the Bhagavan, on Bhagavan or the Brahman. So the Yama means that we are restraining our senses, and we do a deep introspection on this Brahman. Our mind is deeply introspecting on the Brahman. So Yama involves practicing 5 virtues, 5 ethics, which are Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, and Abharigraha. So five virtues have to be practiced, which includes starting off with Ahimsa. So these are all part of Yama in the first step. So Yama includes starting with Ahimsa. Ahimsa is non-violence and non-killing, right? So it is never producing any pain or harm by thought, word, and deed on any living being. That is called Ahimsa. So that means you are not producing any harm both not just by physical way. We are not producing any harm to anyone by thought in our mind, by word through our mouth, and through our actions, through our deed on any living being. That is called ahimsa. We have to practice that. It also includes not harboring hatred towards anyone. That is also ahimsa. Not having equanimity in all situations and on everything. Whatever be the situation, practicing equanimity in that situation, that is also part of ahimsa. And also, it includes concentrating the mind on the Lord and meditating on the Lord. That also is a part of ahimsa, because Bhagavan is the everything, whatever we are going to see next, is all associated with Guruvayoorappan. So, concentrating the mind on Guruvayoorappan is also part of ahimsa. So, in this real world, we have to practice non-violence, but we may not be able to fully do it because of how we are in this current world, because we may have to depend on physical objects for our living, right? And that may require killing something. But the point here is that we have to minimize our dependence on it as much as possible. We have to practice non-violence or non-killing. That is what the point here is. That is ahimsa. The second one is satya. Satya means truth, and Bhagavan himself is the truth. There is nothing other than Bhagavan. The truth, if you see what is truth, that is Bhagavan himself. And therefore the only one, that is Brahman, is the truth. So the second thing that you practice is satya. Satya means, first of all, staying true to Bhagavan or our own self. That is satya. So if you say I am truthful, we have to be first truthful to our own self, right? So that is satya. That is staying true to Bhagavan and our own self. And if you see, in truth, everything is established, and through truth, everything is attained. So if you see, the whole dharma is established in truth, and anything that we want to achieve also is attained through truth only, right? So therefore, that we have to we have to stay true to Bhagavan and ourselves. That is the meaning here. And truth is always orienting towards Bhagavan and not harboring anything adverse to that truth in mind, word, and deed. So if you see here also, it is our mind, word, and deed. The thoughts in our mind, the actions through our mouth, and the deeds, the actions that we actually perform. The words through our mouth and the actions that we actually perform, they all have to be oriented towards Bhagavan, and that is called Satya, that is truth. The next virtue is Asteya, which is non-stealing. So Asteya involves not taking others' goods. So we are not taking anything that is of somebody else's. So anything that belongs to others, including words, even if you pick somebody else's words and say that is yours, that itself is stealing. That's also stealing. So not taking others' goods, which includes others' belongings, and even the words said by others, that is non-stealing. So it includes, again, non-stealing in thoughts, words, and deed, in your mind, in your words, and in your deeds. Staying firm in that Brahman, which is the only thing that pervades everywhere, that is also part of Asteya. So that is non-stealing. The next virtue, the next main ethic, which Bhattathiri spoke about in the sloga, which is called Brahmacharya. So Brahmacharya technically doesn't have an equivalent, the same word in English that captures it in full essence. So that's why I didn't include anything. Brahmacharya means to walk and live in Brahman. In Malayalam we say ബ്രഹ്മത്തിൽ ചരിക്കുകയും ജീവിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുക. അതാണ് ബ്രഹ്മചര്യം. So the brahmacharya means to walk and live in Brahman. So it is not just celibacy. Celibacy is a very important part of it. Celibacy is abstinence from sexual desires and activities. That is a very main part of brahmacharya. But it is not just that. So celibacy and continence, which is restraining our mind, they are both very important part of brahmacharya, but that's not brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is a much bigger activity or much bigger role, where the person walks and live in Brahman. That person is always in that state of Brahman. That means they are in total purity. The purity is not just in our body. It is purity in thought, purity in our word, and purity in our deeds, always and in all conditions. That is called brahmacharya. So it's a very high state, which which is not the state of just being celibate. It is a very high state where there is total purity in your thought, in your word, and in your deed. So we have to practice brahmacharya, which includes not just physical purity. It is total inner purity, which is the purity of our body, the senses, the mind, and the heart. So in brahmacharya, if we call somebody as a brahmachari, they will have total purity in their body, total purity in their senses, total purity in their mind, and total purity in their heart. That state, if somebody has achieved, that person is called a brahmachari. So we have to practice brahmacharya. That is the requirement of yama. And the last, fifth ethic or fifth virtue in yama is aparigraha, which is non-dependence on others' charity. That means not receiving any presents from anybody, not expecting a reward from somebody is part of aparigraha. We are doing something for someone, and we should not expect something in reward. That is part of aparigraha. Even when one is suffering terribly, even when we are in a very bad state, then also not receiving any presents from anybody, that is part of aparigraha. It also includes not holding on to too many things. Sometimes we have a tendency to hold on to things that we like a lot, external objects that we like a lot, we cling on to it. So not holding on to such to objects, that is part of aparigraha. Giving up the tendency to hoard things. Sometimes we tend to hoard things, that we collect certain things and we keep them as our own, that as if we take them everywhere, right? That kind of hoarding. And also not just physically, even in our mind, we hoard things in our mind. So giving up the tendency to hoard things, that is part of aparigraha. Giving others what we don't need. So if you have something that you technically don't need or you are not going to use, donating it to others, that is also part of aparigraha. Giving back when something is received. Let's say somebody gave us something, as a present or something, and you are in a state where I have to accept it, then we should also return something back to them. That quality is all part of aparigraha. So the first step is yama. They have to practice all of these, which are part of yama. And that's the first step of Ashtanga Yoga. And that is what Bhattathiri addressed in the sloka 1, first part. Once you practice yama, then we go into the next one, which is niyama. So let's see what niyama is. The second step. Niyama is controlling the mind and senses and positioning them where one wants, when one wants. That means my senses and my mind and my senses are in our own control, and we are able to position it where we want it at the time where we want it. It's not like it is doing activities on its own. It's whatever we say, that's where the mind and senses stay. Now that state of achieving that state is called niyama. Again, niyama also has 5 specific rules, which includes shauja, sandosha, tabas, swadhyaya, and ishvara pranidhana. So we'll see each of these. Shauja is purity. So it includes inner purity and external purity and cleanliness. So purity of your body, that is very important. We have to keep our body fresh all the time. So that means snanam, taking bath, brushing, all the things that we do to keep our body fresh. That is part of external purity, which is very important here, as Bhattathiri said. Then there is purity of the mind, because as we said in last Dashakam, where Bhagavan resides is in our own heart. In our own Shariram is where Bhagavan resides. So the biggest temple that we can think of for Guruvayoorappan is our own Shariram. That is why it's called Guruvayoorappan. That is where the prana lives. And that is our own Shariram. So the temple, Guruvayur temple, is technically our own Shariram. So that is where we have to keep our body and our mind highly pure. So as part of it, snanam, bath for external purity, and purity in thoughts and words. How do we make our thoughts and words pure? By chanting the names of Bhagavan. Whenever we chant the name of Bhagavan and when we focus on Bhagavan, our mind is getting purified and our words are getting purified. Right? So through that, we can keep purity. That is the first important step of within niyama. The second one in niyama is sandosha. Sandosha means contentment. That means being content, being in a state of content with what we have, and in any situation. So whatever we have or what the situation is right now, being content in that state, and cheerfulness to face and mind always. Having a face and mind that is always cheerful, that is also part of sandosha. And it is only when the mind is directed to the Lord that is actually possible. Only when your mind is fully focused on Guruvayoorappan, that is when we actually attain the true sandosha. So that is the important part in second one, which is sandosha. And also sandosha involves not blaming situations and environment. So let's say situation happened in our life, not blaming that situation and taking ownership. Let's say something happened, something adverse happened to us. We are not blaming the situation and environment. We accept it and surrender it to Guruvayurappan and use our own will to overcome it. That state is part of Sandosha. It also involves avoiding gossip, avoiding complaining, avoiding comparing with others, and avoiding grumbling. So all these qualities are very important to be content, to have sandosha. So gossiping, complaining, comparing, grumbling, we have to avoid all these to remain in this state of sandosha. That is second part of niyama. The third one is tabas. Tabas is technically austerity, high austerity, and sense control is tabas. So whenever we do something with high intensity and focus, there is, let's say, even if we are doing a work and we are highly focused on it and with high intensity, we focus on that work, there is a heat generated in our body. We'll feel that. We'll be highly involved in that activity, that inner heat, that is called taba. Taba means that inner heat. So tabas is doing something with high focus and intensity, that is as an austerity. We are doing it as an austerity, that is called tabas. So which includes embodying austerity and sense control. And tabas is also like fasting. If you are doing a fasting, very focused way of doing fasting, that is part of tabas, because for a certain period of time you are fully avoiding that thought of or our inclination towards food and giving rest to our body, right? That is fasting is part of this tabas. And other ways to control our body and mind, they are all physical tabas. Tabas also involves our effort to turn the mind away from the objects and focus on the Lord. That is also a tabas. That means you are turning away your mind from all the external objects that we see around and focusing it on Guruvayurappan, on the Lord. That is also tabas. So it is the rigor in spiritual practice. So the tabas actually that is being discussed here is the rigor in spiritual practice. You can associate tabas with anything that you do, but here the tabas is being referred to our rigor in spiritual practice in attaining Guruvayurappan. Next one is Swadhyaya, which is self-study. So as part of Niyama, you will do self-study. Whatever we learn, let's say even if you learn Narayaneeyam or anything that we are learning, we have to do a self-study. Go back and study it on our own. So reflecting on what we study, and it's not just reflecting on what we study, we have to also make it part of our life. So reflecting on what we study and making it a part of our own, that is called Swadhyaya. So it includes listening. It's not hearing. Hearing is just hearing through one ear, that is hearing. Listening means you are hearing it carefully. With a careful mind, you are hearing something, that is called listening. Deep reading, you are not just reading it for the sake of reading, you are reading it with high focus, that is called deep reading. So listening, deep reading, and then reflecting on that. Once you have read something, you reflect on that in our mind. You think of it, and with high introspection, you think about it and try to get all the essence out of it, and then you practice it. So this is called self-study or swadhyaya. This is important for students also, or anyone who is a researcher or anyone who is doing study. This is important. They have to listen carefully, they have to do deep reading, they have to reflect on it further and further, and then practice it in their own life. That is swadhyaya. Here, what is the meaning here? Here it is repeating Vedas, mantras, and slogas through which our mind is purified. That is the Swadhyaya being referred here, because you are talking about Guruvayurappan. So you are repeating the names of Guruvayurappan. You are repeating the mantras of Guruvayurappan. You are deeply reading those mantras. You are reflecting on those mantras and reflecting on Guruvayurappan again and again. And then you practice what you have learned, you practice in our life. That is called Swadhyaya. And the last one is Ishvara Pranidhana, which is worshipping and self-surrendering to the Guruvayurappan. Surrendering our body, mind, and soul to Guruvayurappan with complete humbleness and surrender. That is Ishvara Pranidhana. So these are the 5 niyamas. So this is the second step. So we started off with yama, which have 5 subdivisions within it. Then we discussed niyama, which has these 5 subdivisions. Once you practice yama and niyama for several years, that means this has to be part of our life. We have to make all of these part of our life. And when you get to that level of purity, then we can go into the next state, which is the asana. This is the third step, which is asana. Asana here is posture in which we can remain seated, steady, long, and without discomfort. So asana technically here means sthira sugam asana, where you can remain seated steadily for a long period of time without any discomfort, that is what is referred to here as asana, as I said before. So asana is sthira sukha asanam, that which is firm and pleasant. That which is firm and pleasant, that is asana, where you are able to leave the body free. So you leave the body free. You will be holding your chest, shoulders, and head straight. That is a position where you will have your head, our shoulders, and head straight. That position is asana, and you are able to be seated in that position in a firm way, in a steady way, and for a long period of time without any discomfort. That is asana. So this asana is meant to remove our body consciousness. It is not to make us more inclined towards our body. The asanas are actually prescribed to remove our body consciousness, align our energies, and fix our mind on this Guruvayoorappan, on Brahman, on Dhyana. So it is actually not workout, it is actually work in. You are trying to work inside. So there is a workout going on inside. Therefore it is work in. That is the asana that we are talking about. This is meant to control our mind and make it focused on Guruvayoorappan. And this is therefore fix the mind inwardly. The mind that goes around and attaches to everything external in the world, that is from that state, we want to bring the mind inwards towards our inner self, which is the Guruvayoorappan. So that fixing the mind inwardly is this asana, and it also is meant to destroy the impulses, the vrittis that arise in our mind, the waves that we arise in our mind. This asana is meant to destroy those vrittis, the mental impressions. So for that, it is required to hold the spinal cord free. So the spinal cord has to be left free. We have to sit erect. In an erect position, we have to sit. We have to hold the chest, neck, and head in a straight line. And this will allow the prana, the breath, the prana, which is our vital energy, to flow freely through our body. So that position is called asana. And some important asanas for dhyana are discussed. We have listed it here, but Bhattathiri addressed some of them in his sloga also. So there is Sukhasana, which is our seating position that we typically sit when we do for prayer. So that is Sukhasana. Then there is Swastigasana, there is Siddhasana, there is Padmasana, there is also Bhadrasana. These are the several important asanas that are important for dhyana. So all of these are meant to attain the state of dhyana and samadhi later. So for that, these are the prescribed, some of the most important asanas. And Bhattathiri specifically addressed Padmasana. He said he will do Padmasana, and also he will do other asanas that are giving him sugam, like Sukhasana. Sukhasana is a more comfortable seating position for many of us. So Bhattathiri addressed Sukhasana and other asanas that are giving him that sthira sugam. That is what he said in the sloka. So in the second sloka of of Dashakam 4, Bhattathiri addressed the first three steps, which are yama, niyama, and asana. And it is very important to understand, even in the sloka also Bhattathiri referred to it. Once you practice yama and niyama for several years, or once he gets better and better with yama and niyama, and that's when we start on asana. That is what Bhattathiri also prescribed. So with that, we go on to Sloka 3, where Bhattathiri talks about the next two steps of yoga, Ashtanga yoga, which are pranayama and pratyahara.
तारमन्दरनुचिन्त्य सन्दतं प्राणवायुमभियम्य निर्मलाः इन्द्रियाणि विषयाददाबहृत्य आस्महे भवदुपासनोन्मुखाः. അടിയങ്ങൾ മനസ്സിൽ ഓംകാരത്തെ ഇടമുറിയാതെ ധ്യാനിച്ച് ശ്വാസവായുവിനെ സ്വാധീനമാക്കിയിട്ട് കാമക്രോധാദി ദോഷമകന്നവരായി അനന്തരം ഇന്ദ്രിയങ്ങളെ വിഷയങ്ങളിൽ നിന്ന് പിന്തിരിച്ച് അവിടുത്തെ ഉപാസിക്കുന്നതിൽ സന്നദ്ധരായി ഇരുന്നു കൊള്ളാം.
So in Sloka 3, Bhattathiri continues. So he says, once you have practiced yama, niyama, and asana. So this is a state where somebody who has already practiced yama, niyama, and then they have reached the step of asana. And once they have reached the step of asana and they have practiced asana, thereafter, so he says, Adha, thereafter, Antaha, in the mind, in our mind or inside us, Sandadam Anuchindya, I will continuously meditate on. So in our mind or inside me, Bhattathiri says, I will continuously meditate on that taram. Taram means something that takes you from one state to a higher state. That is technically, in general term, taram means that. And what is that? That is the pranava mantra, which is omkara, om. So om is that state, or om is that mantra that takes you from this jivatma. So we are right now, the atma in us is called jivatma. We are want to transcend from this jivatma to Guruvayoorappan, which is the paramatma. So taking us from jivatma to paramatma, that is done by this mantra, omkara mantra, om, which is the highest mantra. So Bhattathiri is saying he will, or we all should practice in our mind. We should continuously meditate on this omkara mantra, which is the taram, which is the one that, which is that it takes us from this current state to that state of Guruvayoorappan, which is the pranava mantra, omkara. How? So once, so he says next. So once he does that, once he to do that practice of focusing on that omkara, he says next. He will first, he says he will do that. He will continuously meditate on that omkara, and then he says pranavayum abhiyamya. So he will control the or regulate his breath, which is prana. The pranavayum means the vital energy in us, which is the prana in us, the breath in us, which is also what we see as Guruvayupuram. Guru means the Brahman, or the highest. Vayu means the prana. Guruvayu means the highest prana, and Puram means where it flows. The prana flows in this universe, the prana also flows through in our shariram. So therefore, Guruvayupuram means the place where the prana flows, which is our own shariram and also the universe, and the lord of that is Guruvayoorappan. So pranavayum abhiyamya, by controlling the prana, the breath, nirmalaha, it becomes purified. So you say mala means anything that is impure, that is termed as mala. So nirmala means where all the impurities are washed away. That is nirmala state. So nirmalaha means becoming completely purified. That is the eradication of all desires, anger, aversion, etc. That state is called nirmalaha. And then he says, how does he achieve it? He achieves it by controlling the breath, controlling and regulating the breath, that state. And he says indriyani. How he does that? The sense organs, which are our 5 senses and our mind, vishayat abahritya, withdrawing from the sense objects. So you will withdraw the senses from our sense of, withdraw the senses from the external objects, the sense objects. So first he says he will control his prana, the breath. Then he says he will, through that he will be able to withdraw his senses. Once he achieves pranayama, or once he controls his breath, he will be then able to also do a withdrawal of his senses from the sense object. Bhavat ubasana unmugaha asmahe. I shall be ready for meditating on thee. So he says he will be ready to meditate. Once he reaches that state, he will be able to meditate on thee. So once he practices pranayama and pratyahara, once those 2 steps are crossed, he'll be ready to meditate on Guruvayoorappan. So the 2 steps that he described are very important, which are pranayama and pratyahara. We will see both in the next slokas. So the first step or the next step that Bhattathiri just described was pranayama, which is, let's go back once again. So in this sloka, Bhattathiri said he will regulate his breath, prana, and purify himself. Through that pranayama, he will purify himself. And then he will go to the next step, which is pratyahara, where he will be able to withdraw his senses from the external sense objects. And once he does both of them, and through that he will be able to continuously meditate on that pranava, and he'll be ready for that meditation by practicing these 2, right? That's what Bhattathiri says. So what is pranayama? Pranayama is the control of our breath. Controlling or regulating our breath is called pranayama. It is also the flow of, it is also the control of the flow of prana. So prana is, as I said, the vital energy in us, and that is the vital energy that is also there in our air, in our breath that we are taking in. So prana is the vital energy, and this is the cosmic energy of the universe. This prana is there in the universe, and it is also in us as our chaitanya. So our chaitanya in us is our prana, and it is also there in our breath. The breath that we take in, that also has prana, and it is actually the power of the Brahman. So this prana is actually said as the power of the Brahman, and that is what we say as Guruvayupuram. So controlling that prana or regulating that prana is called pranayama. So this is discussed in the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. So what does pranayama involve? It is you are regulating your breath. Through that, what happens is you bring in a rhythm in your nervous system. By regulating our breath through both our nostrils, you are bringing in a rhythm in our nervous system, and that will allow us to align the energies in our body. Through this, we are able to align the different energy centers in our body, and this through which we are able to charge our brain. And through that, what is our end goal? Our end goal, as always, is to control our thoughts. So through pranayama, you are able to purify your thoughts or control your thoughts and align it to a higher awareness. So for that, you will use your own awareness, the awareness in us. So as you do pranayama, the awareness in us increases, and through that awareness and will, we are able to control our thoughts. So this, as we said, if you see before, we have seen this, the different chakras in us. So this is associated to the different chakras. However, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali doesn't talk about the Kundalini chakras, and also the Bhagavad Gita also does not talk about these Kundalini chakras. However, they are there in some of the Upanishads, and great sages like Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, they have connected pranayama to these chakras also. So that's why we will just touch upon that. So we said this before, we have the chakras which are starting from Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipuraga, Anahata, Vishuddha, Ajna and Sahasrara. So we said this before, our lower chakras, which are Manipura, Swadhisthana and Mooladhara, these are associated when you are in a body conscious way. These are the chakras that are active. But as you go towards a higher awareness, as you start as you start towards Guruvayoorappan, as you focus towards the Lord, we will our energy center, our Anahata chakra is activated, the heart center is activated, and as you practice this yoga or even pranayama or japa, all these, as you practice this, our chakras get, we are able to bring in that Kundalini energy to higher levels of energy points, which includes Vishuddha, Ajna, and finally the Sahasrara chakra, which is the Samadhi state. When our energies reach the Sahasrara chakra, is the actual Samadhi state where they are one with Guruvayoorappan. So again, this, as I said, this is not referred to in the Yoga Sutras. Pranayama is not connected to these energy chakras in the Yoga Sutras, but there is this connection is discussed by many sages. That's why we brought it here. So pranayama is this yogic breath control. What it says is that a greatly disciplined mind, so a mind that has already done yama, niyama and asana, in that mind will be highly disciplined. Such a mind has to then go and practice pranayama, which is in such a mind which is in that proper spiritual mood will be lifted to higher planes of consciousness through pranayama. So rising these energies can be done in different ways. Pranayama is one of those ways, and for that you have to first of all discipline your mind. You have to reach that state to do these pranayamas properly. So it includes three parts, which is Puraga, which is inhaling, Kumbhaga, which is restraining that prana in us. So Puraga is inhaling the prana through our nostrils, that is Puragam. Then Kumbhagam is restraining it in our inside, that is, or keeping it stationary inside our body, that is Kumbhagam. And Rejagam is rejecting it or exhaling it. And there are different ways that are prescribed in pranayama practices to do these, which we won't discuss here. However, it is said in by many acharyas and in many books, it's said that higher levels of pranayama requires proper guidance from a true guru. A true guru or a yogi has to prepare us for these pranayamas, and we also need to prepare ourselves. As we said, we have to practice yama, niyama, asanas to reach the state. And it is also said that it is not advisable to practice pranayama if somebody is too busy or immoderate in life. If you don't have moderation in our life, in the activities, and then if you go and do pranayama, many acharyas have said that it will cause harmful effects on our body and our mind. So it is advisable to only practice it if we are in that state. Once we have reached that state of pranayama through practice of yama, niyama, asanas, that's when we do pranayama. We'll not describe further on that. Second is pratyahara, which is the detachment of the body and the senses from worldly objects. So Bhattathiri said pranayama, which is regulating the breath, and then he said detaching the senses, which is pratyahara. So pratyahara is bringing the indriyas, our five indriyas, right? We have our five jnanendriyas, which we have discussed before, under our own control of our own will, and gathering them towards our inner self. by detaching it from the external objects, that is called pratyahara. So again, these are all technical terms, and I request everyone to maybe go through these once again later if interested, so that you can understand the full meaning. So pratyahara is bringing the indriyas under our own control and gathering them towards our own inner self by detaching it from the external objects. That is called pratyahara. Again, somebody can achieve the state of pratyahara through this practice of each of these steps. Pratyahara is meant to stop the leakage of our mind into external objects, stop the leakage of our energies into external objects. That's what pratyahara is meant for. So as we know, we take in information through our five senses, as we see, we hear, we smell, we taste, and we touch. Through our five senses, we take in information, and that affects the quality of our mind. Each of these are food for our mind, aharam for our mind, and that affects the quality of our mind. Now, what pratyaharam is telling us is, let's say, let's look at this example. So our mind may have different thoughts coming up. We may have the thoughts of, let's say, anger. We might be angry at some point. Other times we might be craving for a food that we like, right? At other times we might be highly indulging on let's say smartphones or something that is distracting us, right? So all of these are different states of our mind or our thoughts. So when that happens, what pratyahara is saying is that you have to be a witness. So he says, Bhattathiri says you have to practice pratyahara, which is be a witness. That means you have to sit still and look at our thoughts. So in pratyahara, you have to think of the inner witness in us. That is the essence of any spiritual activity, to keep on connecting to the witness in us. So be a witness, sit still and look at our thoughts. So just like this picture here, each of the thoughts that we come into our mind, we look at that thought, not attaching to that thought as an external witness. Look at our thoughts, don't fight the thought, simply watch the thought. So we don't fight that thought, we just simply watch that thought, and we do not get attached. So let's say an example, let's say if a thought of anger comes in our mind, that means a wave of anger is coming in, and that our mind is now in that angry mood. Similarly, maybe a wave of craving is coming in. We are craving for a specific food, so that craving is coming in as a thought in our mind. Or let's say some kind of an indulgence is coming in our mind as a wave. What we do is, we don't get attached to that thought of anger, craving, or indulgence. As an external witness, look at that thought. So we will look at that thought as an external witness. Simply watch, do not get attached, and just use our awareness and remind us that I am that witness and not that thought. So we remind ourselves that I am the witness and I am not this thought. I am not this anger that has risen in my mind. I am not that craving that has risen in my thought. I am not this indulgence that my body is making me do. So I am not that. I am the witness. And I am not that thought. When this state is done, or when you practice this, slowly our senses lose grip. When we practice this several times, slowly our senses will lose our grip on that thought, and our energy returns inward. This returning of our energy inward is called pratyahar. That state of able to return our energies inside by being a witness, that is called pratyahar. And when that happens, we are able to concentrate. Once we achieve this pratyahara, then only our mind can go into the state of meditation, concentration. That is being discussed next. So in this sloka, Bhattathiri addressed two of the steps: pranayama, controlling our prana through breath, and pratyahara, which is detaching our mind from the external worldly objects, mind and senses from the worldly objects. And through that, next we are able to concentrate our mind. Why? Because right now we already have physical purity. By completing yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, the person has achieved both physical purity and also mental purity. Their body is pure, their mind is also now pure. With that pure state, now we are able to concentrate on Guruvayoorappan. We have to reach that state of purity to focus on Guruvayoorappan fully. That is the next step, which is dharana. So Bhattathiri talks about dharana in sloka 4.
अस्फुटेव भूषिते प्रयत्नतो धारये मधिषणा मुहुर्मुहुः तेन भक्तिरसमन्दरार्द्रतां उद्वहेम भवदङ्घ्रिचिन्तकाः. അടിയങ്ങൾ അവിടുത്തെ സ്പഷ്ടമല്ലാത്ത സ്വരൂപത്തിൽ പണിപ്പെട്ട് ബുദ്ധിയെ വീണ്ടും വീണ്ടും ഉറപ്പിച്ചു നിർത്തിക്കൊള്ളാം. അവിടുത്തെ തൃപ്പാദങ്ങളെ ചിന്തിക്കുന്ന അടിയങ്ങൾ ധാരണാ പരിശീലനം കൊണ്ട് ഭക്തി ആനന്ദത്തെയും ഹൃദയാഗ്രീഭാവത്തെയും പ്രാപിച്ചുകൊള്ളാം.
So in Sloka 4, Bhattathiri is talking about the next step. Once we complete yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, the next step, which is dharana. So Bhattathiri says, aspude vabushi te, on thy form, which is vague. So Bhattathiri is talking about the form of Guruvayoorappan. So here what we need to understand is that Guruvayoorappan is that Brahman. And this, when we start focusing on that Brahman, initially our mind will not be able to comprehend it, because our mind, as we said before, is a defective object. And with a defective object, we are trying to capture something that is perfect, which is infinite. And we'll never be able to capture that in full entirety with a defective object. So when you start focusing on Bhagavan's form, which is that Brahman, initially you won't be able to capture all the details. This is the same thing as, let's say we go to Guruvayur and try to look at Guruvayoorappan's idol. In that queue, we may not be able to capture all the details. We may only see some of Bhagavan's details, right? Some of the details will be very clear in our mind, but some other details will not be fully clear in our mind. Again, when we come back later, we will see a different form, and we will see that it's a new form, which is highly fresh. So each time we see something new each time, right? So therefore, Bhattathiri is saying, your form, Guruvayoorappa, your form, which I see now, is very vague. I am trying to see that form in my mind. So this is the state of somebody who is trying to meditate. When we try to meditate on Bhagavan, we may not be able to capture all the details, and our mind may not be able to hold all the details of that Bhagavan. Why? Because Bhagavan is that Brahman. And first of all, we will never be able to capture that Brahman with our mind. Or this is the Brahman is that infinite, right? With our limited mind, we are never able to capture that Brahman. Second is that when we start focusing, we cannot focus on the Nirguna Brahman initially. So therefore we need a form, that is the Saguna form, the form that we see at Guruvayur, the idol of Guruvayoorappan, or the idol of Krishna, or any picture of Krishna. These are all the Saguna form of Guruvayoorappan. So we start off with that Saguna form of Guruvayoorappan. And even when you start off on the Saguna form, as we start doing meditation, or initially when we start it as Dharana, we may not be able to get all the details. Our mind might get distracted to many other things. So we may not, after some time, we will even lose that focus that we had. So initially, I am not able to get a perfect picture of you. The perfect picture is here. If you look at Guruvayoorappan, the perfect picture is his Keshadi Pada Varnanam and Padadi Kesham, right? So maybe when we start focusing on Bhagavan through meditation, we may not be able to capture all the Keshadi Pada details and Padadi Kesha details. We may not be able to capture that. But Bhattathiri says, on your form right now, which is vague to me, I am not able to fully capture it, your form, Bhagavan. He says, prayatnadaha, with great effort. Even though it is not clear to me, even though it is vague right now, Bhagavan, Guruvayoorappa, your form is still vague right now to me, but with great effort, by doing a lot of practice, prayatnam, I will dishanam, my mind, my buddhi, my mind, I will fix on you again and again. He says, dishanam muhuhu, again and again, dharayema, I will fix on you, I shall fix on you. This is dharana. So in dharana, you are trying to focus on the form of the Lord, but our mind, as we know, we try to focus on one thing on Bhagavan. After a while, mind moves to something else. So we have to again bring our mind back to Guruvayoorappan. Then again we focus on Bhagavan for some time. Again our mind runs to something else. So we bring it back. We saw this in our previous Dashakam. That practice of bringing our mind back to Guruvayoorappan again and again, that is called dharana. So that is the first step of meditation. When we start meditation, that's the first step. This is something we already discussed in our previous Dashakam. So he says he will fix on Guruvayoorappan again and again. Tena, by doing so, he says he will bhavat angri chindagaha, he will meditate on your holy feet by bringing my mind again and again, even though it flows to something else, and even though I am not able to fully capture all the details, Guruvayoorappa, I will still bring my mind again and again to you, and through that I'll be able to meditate on your holy feet. So the focus, our ultimate goal is to reach that holy feet. So Bhattacharya says, I will meditate on your holy feet by bringing my mind again and again and fixing it onto you. Through that, he says, Bhakti Rasam, the bliss of devotion, Andaha Ardratam, and the tenderness of the heart I shall attain. Utvahema. So I will be able to attain that Bhakti Rasam, the bliss of devotion, and the tenderness that is needed in my heart. That I will be able to attain by bringing my mind back again and again onto you. That process is called dharana, the first state when you start meditation. So dharana, which we saw again in our last dashakam, which is fixing the mind on a particular center of consciousness, which is the word or the form of the Lord. If you are fixing our mind either on a word, japa, when you do japa, we can fix our mind on the word that we are doing a japa on Narayana, we can fix our mind onto Narayana, or we can also do a dharana on the form, Guruvayoorappan's form. That is called dharana. So in dharana, as we saw before in Dashakam 3, we have the subject, which is the bhakta. We are trying to meditate on an object, which is Guruvayoorappan. So in dharana, there is a subject and an object. And as we saw, our mind will have vrittis. So initially what we do, we attach the vrittis to Guruvayoorappan. So if you see, when a thought arises in our mind, I am attaching that thought onto Guruvayoorappan. So the thought of Guruvayoorappan has now risen in my mind. So I am sitting for meditation. The thought is now on Guruvayoorappan. So my mind is now Guruvayoorappan. Whatever my thought is, that's my mind. So my thought now is Guruvayoorappan. My pratyaya is Guruvayoorappan. So my mind is Guruvayoorappan. I keep on doing that steadily for some time. For some time, I'm able to steadily focus my mind on Guruvayoorappan. But at some point, it will again go back to something else. Slowly, we will never know it. A new thought will come. It might go away from Guruvayoorappan and attach to something. Let's say it attached to some food. So what I do with my awareness that I already saw in Pratyaharam, we saw our awareness. So with our awareness, we bring back that thought back to Guruvayoorappan. Whenever our mind flows to something else, we bring it back to Guruvayoorappan. So initially it might flow to something else. We'll again bring it back to Guruvayoorappan and keep it on Guruvayoorappan. That state of focusing, trying to focus our mind on one object, which is Guruvayoorappan here, that is called dharana. And in the case of dharana, you can see there is stable vrittis, there is stable modifications, but the pratyay, the thought is relatively the same. It is always Guruvayoorappan. Such a mind is a concentrated mind. So dharana is essentially helping you to create a concentrated mind before we go into meditation. So dharana is the first step on the steps for meditation. Then so that is what is addressed in sloka 4. Now Bhattacharya talks about the next step once you practice dharana. So he says here, he will do it again and again. So he will practice this for several times. So it's not like once you get dharana, you are immediately ready for meditation. You have to practice it for several time and several years, and then you reach a state of meditation. So that is the next step that Bhattacharya discusses in sloka 5.
विस्फुडावयवभेदसुन्दरं त्वद्वपुःसुचिरशीलनावशात् अश्रमं मनसि चिन्तयामहे ധ്യാനയോഗനിരതാസ്ത്വദാശ്രയാഃ. അവിടുത്തെ ശരണം പ്രാപിച്ച അടിയങ്ങൾ ധ്യാനയോഗത്തിൽ തത്പരന്മാരായിട്ട് അവയവങ്ങൾ നല്ലവണ്ണം തെളിഞ്ഞു മിന്നുന്ന മനോഹരമായ അവിടുത്തെ രൂപം സുദീർഘമായ ധാരണാഭ്യാസത്താൽ ക്ലേശം കൂടാതെ മനസ്സിൽ ഭാവന ചെയ്തുകൊള്ളാം.
So Bhattacharya is saying now, initially he started on dharana. He is trying to focus on Guruvayoorappan's form, but he is not able to fully capture all the details because it is vague and his mind is running here and there. But whenever it runs, he will bring the mind back to Guruvayoorappan and again focus on Guruvayoorappan's form. He is practicing it for he will continue practicing it for several times until he reaches a state of dhyana, which is what is being discussed here. So tvat asrayaha, and again he's talking about not just himself, he's talking about all of us who is reading Narayaneeyam is being referred here. We who have taken refuge in the Guruvayoorappa, tvat asrayaha dhyana yoga niradaha, the next step Bhattacharya is addressing, which is dhyana, with the intention on meditating on you, intent on dhyana on you, on meditating on you. And how? Sujir Shilanavashat, which is by practicing it for a long time. So you will practice this dharana for a long time to reach this dhyana state. See, dhyana is not something, or meditation is not something that we can technically do. It is a state that we reach, right? It is not an action that we directly can do. It is a state that we reach after doing dharana for several, for a long period of time. So he will reach that state of dhyana by practicing it for a long time. And when that happened, what he's saying is that he will be able to vispuda avayava bheda sundaram. When he reaches the state of dhyana, all the limbs of Bhagavan. Earlier, he was not able to understand the features of Bhagavan because his mind is running away, and also the features of Bhagavan is vaguely, there in his mind. But now, all the limbs of Bhagavan is becoming more and more clear to him. He is able to see all the details. He is able to see Bhagavan's face. He is able to see Bhagavan's, the eyes which are filled with, ardrada. We saw that he is able to see the nose of Bhagavan. He is able to see the lips of Bhagavan. He is able to see the Magara Kundalams, the reflection of the kundalams from his cheeks. He's able to see that. He's able to see the Vanamala on Bhagavan, all the details of Bhagavan. He's able to see Bhagavan's yellow silk dress. He's able to see Bhagavan's legs, the Gada, the Shanga, the Chakra, the Patmam. He's able to see every feature of Bhagavan with more clarity, and everything looks really beautiful. It is really beautiful to see Bhagavan in that form, which is Tvat Vabuhu, Thai form, your Saguna form of Guruvayoorappan. By practicing Dharana, I will reach a state of Dhyana where I am able to completely see your form with full clarity, the Saguna form of Guruvayoorappan, which I am able to see now, Guruvayoorappa. He says, Asramam Manasi, without any effort in the mind, Chindayamahe, we shall contemplate. That means in that state of Dhyana, there is no need for extra effort. Once you reach the state of dhyana, it is without any effort, because in dharana you are practicing. You are, each time when our mind goes, brings it back to Guruvayoorappan, and we are practicing it for a long period. And now we have reached a state of dhyana where automatically when we think of that Guruvayoorappan, all the details of Guruvayoorappan is available to you, and that mind without any effort will connect to that Guruvayoorappan, and you are able to contemplate on that Guruvayoorappan. That is the state of dhyana, which is what Bhattathiri is talking about here. So dhyana is maintaining a continuous flow of a single thought of the divine. You are doing it is not a thought that is breaking. It is a continuous flow of a single thought. You have only one focused thought, which is Guruvayoorappan, and that is dhyana, which is the meditative state. But here also, if you see, there is a subject and there is an object. But what is happening? The subject is able to fully focus on the object. So the object is now very clear. In the earlier dharana, it was not fully clear. Here, if you see, our thought is not like the waves that come, rise and fall, as we saw before. Here, the waves are like small projections that we see on like a stable ocean, like a small projection that rises and falls at the same point. That's how the waves are. So our thought is very focused, and that thought is not changing at all. It is always on Guruvayoorappan. In dharana, if you see, it was like the high waves, low waves, etc., where mind goes here and there. And when again you bring it back to Guruvayoorappan. But in dhyana, it is fully focused at one point, focus on Guruvayoorappan. That is the state in dhyana. So there is not any fluctuating vrittis. Your vrittis, which are the modifications, the waves, which are not fluctuating, and they are rising and falling at the same point. That is the state of the vritti. And the pratyay is the actual thought. And if you see, the pratyay is always Guruvayoorappan. In the previous case, the pratyay was also changing in between. But here, the pratyay is not at all changing. It is always on Guruvayoorappan. And you are able to completely see the full form of Guruvayoorappan with all the details. That is your meditative state. So Bhattathiri says, now, once I practice dharana, I am getting into dhyana. So in the state of dhyana, the person who is meditating on Guruvayoorappan, there is still a subject and object. There is the self, that I, and also the Guruvayoorappan, the Lord. And the subject is fully focused on the object with the non-fluctuating vrittis rising and falling. And the same pratyay all the time, which is pratyay is Guruvayoorappan. So the thought is always Guruvayoorappan. And the vrittis are rising and falling at the same point. It is not like a wave. That state is your meditative state, the dhyana state. So that's the next step that Bhattathiri addressed here. Now, once we reach the dhyana state, now we further go beyond it, which is the samadhi state. which Bhattadiri addresses in the next sloka, sloka 6.
ध्यायतां सकलमूर्तिमीदृशीम् उन्मिषन्मधुरदाहृदात्मनां सान्द्रमोदरसरूपमान्दरं ബ്രഹ്മരൂപമയിതേവ ഭാസത്തെ. ഹേ ഭഗവൻ, ഇപ്രകാരമുള്ള സാവയവ രൂപത്തെ ധ്യാനിക്കുന്നവരും അഭിവ്യക്തമായ മാധുര്യത്താൽ വശീകൃത ഹൃദയരുമായ യോഗികൾക്ക് ആനന്ദഘനസ്വരൂപവും മനസ്സുകൊണ്ട് മാത്രം ഗ്രഹിക്കാവുന്നതുമായ അവിടുത്തെ രൂപമാകുന്ന ബ്രഹ്മം പ്രകാശിക്കുന്നു.
So in Sloka 5, Bhattadiri spoke about Dharana and Dhyana. Sloka 4 and 5, Dharana and Dhyana. So in Dhyana, we are focusing on the form of Guruvayoorappan. We are looking at the form of Guruvayoorappan, which is a Saguna form, which has all the details that we see when we see Guruvayoorappan's Vigraham at Guruvayur. Now we have to transcend beyond that. So once we continue doing this dhyana, practicing this dhyana and keeping on meditating on Bhagavan, we will reach a state of infinite bliss. That is a state of samadhi, and that is what Bhattadiri is being describing here in this sloka. He says, I, O Bhagavan, O Lord, Sagala Murtim Idrishim, such a formful aspect of yours, which is the Saguna form of Guruvayoorappan, that formful aspect, Dhyayadam, to those who meditate on that. So those who meditate on your Saguna form. So it is really hard to directly focus on the Nirguna Brahman. The Nirguna Brahman is attributeless. It is the Brahman everywhere. It is the ever-pervading Guruvayoorappan everywhere. However, it doesn't have any form. The Nirguna state of Guruvayoorappan doesn't have any form. However, and therefore our mind cannot connect to something that doesn't have any form, because that's the state of everyone's mind. So to get to that Nirguna state, first we have to attach Saguna state, which is the form of Guruvayoorappan that we see. So right now Bhattadiri says, to that formful aspect of yours, which is the Saguna form of Guruvayoorappan, the idol at Guruvayur that we see, I meditate on that, Dhyayadam, I meditate on that form of Guruvayoorappan, Unmishan Madhurada Hrit Atmanam, and so whose minds are captivated by the manifesting beauty, that is by doing a meditation on your form, on that Saguna form of Guruvayoorappan, on Guruvayoorappan's idol, the Vigraha of Guruvayoorappan, our mind is captivated by that beauty. Our mind is fully attracted to that form of Guruvayoorappan, and it is captivated by that beauty. And because of that captivation, and because we are doing a dhyana, we are doing a complete dhyana on that form of Guruvayoorappan, we will start experiencing a bliss inside us, and that bliss is of the nature of sweetness. We will experience a sweetness, ananda, but also it is rasa, it is sweet, it is madhurada, it is sweet madhurada. And in that state, the person now will experience a state of Sandra Moda Rasa Rubam, very important word, or very beautiful word, which is same as Sandranandava Bodhatmakam, which we saw in the first Dashakam. He says, Sandra Moda Rasa Rubam. To that person who meditates on your Saguna form, then they will experience a bliss, which is Sandra. Sandra means highly concentrated. Sandrananda means, Sandra means, we saw this before, which is highly concentrated, like we say, like a solidified form of joy. So the person will experience Sandra Moda Rasa Rubam, which is concentrated inward joy and bliss. That means the person will experience concentrated infinite bliss. Once we focus on Guruvayoorappan's Saguna form, focus on that, meditating on that Saguna form for a long period of time, and as we continuously do that, that person will experience a high bliss, which is concentrated bliss of infinity of Guruvayoorappan, and that will shine inside us, Andaram, which will shine inside ourselves. It is not external. This Guruvayoorappan will shine from inside of us. That is what Bhattadiri is saying. That shining of that high bliss that is shining inside us, that is the Brahma Rubam. That is your Brahma Rubam. That happiness is that Brahman. That happiness that we experience, that is the Brahman. That is the Rubam of Brahman. So Brahma Rubam Te, that is your impersonal Nirguna form of Guruvayoorappan, which is the Brahman Avabhasade, that will shine in us. So that Nirguna Brahman will shine inside us. That state is called Samadhi. So Bhattadiri is talking about the last step of Ashtanga Yoga here, which is the Samadhi state. So in Samadhi, it is called the super conscious state. In this state, if you see, again there is a subject. However, the subject is now fully immersed in that object. So subject and object are now one. So there is no more subject now. The subject has essentially turned into that object. That means the Bhakta has turned into Guruvayurappan. So initially it was the Bhakta who was meditating. Now that Bhakta has now, the Guruvayurappan is radiating from that Bhakta. So essentially the Bhakta himself has turned into Guruvayurappan, because that Guruvayurappan is shining inside of them and they are in that state of bliss, that infinite bliss, which is Samadhi. In that state, there is no more mind. Earlier, we were trying to use our mind to connect to Guruvayurappan. Whenever a thought comes, that is when we have a mind, and we were trying to attach our mind to Guruvayurappan. Now that we have become that Guruvayurappan. So there is no more mind. No, because the mind was just a tool. Now we have become that Guruvayurappan, so there is no need of that tool. So that in this state, the knower, which is that Bhakta, the knowledge, which is the knowledge of Guruvayurappan, and the known, which is Guruvayurappan, they all become one, which is the Bhakta, the Bhakti, and the Lord all becomes one, which we saw in the previous Dashakam. If you remember, we said Hanuman Swami and Sri Ram Swami becoming one. That state, that is the Nirguna Brahman, the Samadhi state, where the subject is one with the object. This state is called knowing by being, because you are trying to know Guruvayurappan or Brahman by becoming Brahman. You are knowing Guruvayurappan by becoming Guruvayurappan. That is why it's called knowing by being. In this state, there is no more mind. Earlier, there was a thought. Now the thought is completely on Guruvayurappan, and now you become Guruvayurappan. So there is no more thought, there is no more mind, and there is no more waves. You are in that deep bliss inside the ocean. That state is called Samadhi. So initially, if you see in the Samadhi state also, when we enter Samadhi, initially you will initially still have an I, and that I turns into Guruvayurappan. So there is still, initially there is still an ego. There is still an self in the initial stages. In the initial stages, there is still Guruvayurappan and me in the Samadhi state. That is called Savikalpa Samadhi. But however, as you further proceed in that Samadhi state, you will understand that this Guruvayurappan was nothing but that Brahman, and you are also that Brahman. So you will, everything is that Brahman. You will understand, or will realize that state, that everything that we see around is that Brahman. And that state of Samadhi is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So initially it is Savikalpa Samadhi. That means still a thought remains that I am a Bhakta and there is Guruvayurappan in the Samadhi state. But as the person continues in that Samadhi state, they will reach a state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where they know that Guruvayurappan and myself and everything that we see around is that one Brahman. That is the Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So Bhattathiri is addressing the state of entering Savikalpa Samadhi. So in this sloka, Bhattathiri starts with Savikalpa Samadhi, where he says he will meditate on Lord's ever beautiful and enchanting form of Guruvayurappan. So he is looking at Guruvayurappan's beautiful form, and he is meditating on that form, the Saguna form, and his mind is fully fixed on that form. Initially, in the beginning stage, his mind is fully fixed on that form, and gradually, as the Bhakta meditates, the form of the Lord, the Guruvayurappan, will start radiating with high brilliance inside them, and that becomes more and more beautiful. The form of Guruvayurappan becomes more and more beautiful, and it will radiate with high brilliance inside that Bhakta. That is the state where you are entering Savikalpa Samadhi. But here also there is still Bhakta and Bhagavan. So that's why it's called Savikalpa Samadhi. Our hearts now will merge with that form. So that is a state where our heart is merging with that Guruvayurappan. That is Savikalpa Samadhi, which is where there is still Bhagavan and Bhakta. But as we continuously do it, we will reach a state where the Bhakta and Bhagavan becomes one, and that is the non-dual state. That is the Advaita. So we were in that state of Savikalpa Samadhi. In that state, we said, in the state of Savikalpa Samadhi, our mind is about to merge to that Guruvayurappan. So in that Savikalpa Samadhi state, there is still a Bhakta and Bhagavan. And so in that state, that is the entering the Samadhi state. And as we continue, as that person continues in that Savikalpa Samadhi state, what happens is that they will reach a state where the Bhakta and the Bhagavan become one, which is the non-dual Advaita Bhavam, non-dual state, Advaita Bhavam, which is non-dual means there is not a second, there is only that one Brahman. So initially we are in that Savikalpa Samadhi state where we still know that I'm in full focus with Guruvayurappan and my heart is now filled with Guruvayurappan, but you still know that you are separate from Guruvayurappan. And after some more time in that Samadhi state, the person will reach the Nirvikalpa Samadhi state, where they know that the Bhakta and Bhagavan, they are all one. And in that state, the pure, formless, attributeless Brahman is pure, it is formless, it is attributeless. That is the nature of Brahman that will shine inside them. That is the Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So Bhattadiri is talking about both Savikalpa Samadhi and Nirvikalpa Samadhi in this sloka. And Bhattadiri is saying that he's seeking to reach that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Bhattadiri's goal essentially is that to reach this Nirvikalpa Samadhi state, that is to attain the Brahman. Initially itself, he started off by saying Sandra Ananda Avabodhatmakam, which is that Brahman, which is this Nirvikalpa Samadhi state. And Bhattadiri wants to attain that state, and he's seeking for that to Guruvayoorappan. So we will do one more sloga number 7, and we'll stop it there because this is a long Dashakam with 15 slogas. So we'll stop in the break in the middle of the Dashakam with sloga 7.
Tatsamasvadanarubhinim sthidim Tvatsamadhimai Vishwanayaka Ashrita Punarada Parityudau Arabhe Mahicha Dharanadigam. He Jagat Prabho, Shuddha Brahmanubhava Rupamaya Avasthavisheshamagunna Avidutte Samadhiye Nirvikalpa Samadhiye പ്രാപിച്ചവരായിട്ട് ഈ നിർവികൽപ്പ സമാധിയിൽ നിന്നും ഭ്രംശം സംഭവിക്കുമ്പോൾ വീണ്ടും ധാരണാദികളെ ആരംഭിച്ചുകൊള്ളാം.
So in sloga 6, in the previous sloga, Bhattadiri spoke about attaining samadhi by continuous. First we started off with dharana. Whenever our mind, we try to fix our mind on Guruvayoorappan, we repeatedly do that. And whenever our mind goes away from that, we'll bring it back to Guruvayoorappan. That is dharana. We continuously do that for several times or several periods, and then we reach a state of dhyana, meditation, where we are fully focused on, our mind is in a single point focused on Guruvayoorappan. That state is called dhyana. In that dhyana state, we are able to fully see Bhagavan's complete form. That is the dhyana state. In the dhyana state, we continuously practice the dhyana state, and then the bhakta will enter the state of samadhi. First, they will reach a state of Savikalpa Samadhi, where the heart is filled with Guruvayoorappan. And then as they continue further, they will go into the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where they will understand that the Guruvayoorappan and themselves, they are all one, and that Guruvayoorappan, the Brahman, will shine from them with full intensity, and they will experience infinite bliss. That was the Dhyana Samadhi state. Now Bhattadiri says in sloga 7, he starts with I Vishwanayaka, O Lord of the universe, Guruvayoorappa, who is the Lord of the universe, Vishwanayaka, Tat Samaswadana Rubinim Sthidim, the state of immediate experience of Brahman. So in that Samadhi state, so now Bhattadiri is talking about Samadhi state, where you are directly experiencing the Brahman, in that state of immediate experience of Brahman. Tvat Samadhim, which is the Samadhi state. That means now in that state which is established in Samadhi, which is the Nirvikalpa Samadhi state, Asritaha, having attained that Samadhi, now that once we have attained that Samadhi state, Punaha Adaha, again from there, Parichudau, whenever my mind slips down from it. That means, let's say we are in the Samadhi state, we are experiencing that Brahman, but there could be chances that we will come out of that Samadhi state after some time, right? So whenever my mind slips down from it, Chudi means when you are slipping down, when some kind of failure happens. So Parichudau means whenever my mind slips down from it, Arabe Mahicha, then I shall resort again, I will again do Dharana Adigam, the practice of Dharana, and then going to Dhyana, and then going to Samadhi. That means Bhattadiri is saying that whenever I am in the state of Samadhi now and experiencing that Brahman. However, whenever due to any other reasons, because we have to be humble enough to be in that state, but many a times, even if with small ego, we will come down from that state. So let's say I am in that Samadhi state, but if by any chance I fall from this state of Samadhi, that means I am not more able to experience you, Guruvayoorappa, then I will again start practicing Dharana, Dhyana to reach that Samadhi state. He will continuously practice that. So he will do a continuous practice of Dharana, Dhyana, and so that you can reach that Nirvikalpa Samadhi state. That is what Bhattadiri is saying. So Now, here one thing to note is somebody who has reached a samadhi state, Bhattacharya also is carefully putting these words. They technically doesn't have to go start from yama, niyama and all, because they have already crossed all that steps. They have crossed yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara and reached that dhyana state. So somebody who has already reached the samadhi state doesn't necessarily have to fall from here till here. They may only reach this. They can start from this dharana step, because they already, to reach the samadhi state, they would have already crossed all these steps in a very high way, in a very successful way, and they have become the best in those steps. So therefore, once you fall from samadhi, you can start from dharana. You will start from dharana and again do a dhyana on Bhagavan and to reach that samadhi state. That is what Bhattacharya is saying. So again, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which we just spoke about in the previous sloka, which is the Bhakta and Bhagavan becoming one, which is a non-dual form of Guruvayoorappan, the Brahman, and that Brahman is radiating from that Bhakta. The Bhakta is one with that Brahman and understands that there is nothing else outside. Everything that you see around is that Guruvayoorappan, the Brahman. That is a Nirvikalpa Samadhi state. However, there could be obstructions that can happen to this Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and that rarely happens to realized souls. So what we are talking about, the points that we are talking about are about Nirvikalpa Samadhi. These are states achieved by very high realized souls. However, rarely there could be obstructions. What are these obstructions? And they are, sometimes the Samadhi state becomes a sleep state. That means that is called Laya, or Samadhi state becoming a sleep, or it is interfered with a sleep. That is called Laya. Some others may attain yoga siddhi. So once you reach Samadhi state, by that stage of that person, they would have realized a lot of siddhis. So they might attain yoga siddhis and they stop. That is also a achyuti, that you are falling from that step. Then some others may get attached to external objects again. Now earlier we crossed that barrier of external objects through our yama, niyama and all that. But however, again somebody could get attached to external objects. That's why for a spiritual person or somebody who's trying to attain this, they have to always be cautious. That is what is the point here. So attachment to external objects, again, that can happen through distraction, which is called viksheba. That can also happen through latent vasanas. There might be vasanas that are latent in us, which we never knew earlier, that can sprout again, which is called kashaya. So these that can happen, which can again bring that person from samadhi down. Or there could be other situations where the bhakta becomes more comfortable with the lower state as bhakta and Bhagavan. The Nirvikalpa Samadhi is the highest state that somebody should seek for. However, they will feel that they are more comfortable in being in a lower state, where they, like in the Savikalpa Samadhi state, where the bhakta and Bhagavan are different. They find that to be more pleasant. That is called rasaswada. So any of these could happen, and if any of these happens, the person will again fall from that highest step, from the samadhi step to lower steps. But Bhattacharya is saying that if any of these situations happen, he will again try. He will again start from dharana, again do dhyana to reach the samadhi state. He is 100% sure about that. So Bhattacharya says, if he loses balance from this samadhi state, he will definitely hold on to that state and climb up again without falling to lower steps. So this is the mindset. This is the most important mindset a bhakta should have. As we focus on Guruvayoorappan, there could be situations in life where we might fall from the steps that we have achieved. However, the mindset should be the mindset that Bhattacharya is showing. If by any chance, if he loses balance and I fall from that state, I will hold on to it and climb up again and again without falling to lower steps. This is the most important mindset a bhakta should have. And this is the nature of a Jivan Mukta. A Jivan Mukta, which we will see in the next sloka, who a Jivan Mukta is. The main quality of a Jivan Mukta is, even if they will perform everything in the world, they will perform the actions they have to do in the world, but fully attached to Guruvayoorappan or the Lord. And even if they fall from their current state that they have achieved, they will continuously still do it again and again to go back to the realized state, the Samadhi state. And that is what Bhattacharya is saying in sloka 7. So we, in the first 7 slokas of Dashakam 4, Bhattacharya addressed yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana and samadhi, which are the 8 limbs of yoga. This is the actual yoga. This is the Ashtanga yoga. And finally, we ended up with Nirvikalpa Samadhi state. And if Bhattadiri says in this sloka, if he falls from this Nirvikalpa Samadhi to lower steps, he will continuously still do Dharana, Dhyana to reach back to the Samadhi state. So with that, we will end here and we will take up sloka 8 from our next session, because we are talking, it will talk about other things beyond what we just discussed. So we'll stop it here. So if there were any mistakes from our side, we apologize to everyone and to Guruvayoorappan, and both Anju and I, submit this session to our Ponnu Guruvayoorappan's lotus feet. Narayana Guru Bhagavan Namaste. Guruvayoorappa. Thank you.